Colleen Marsh spent 30 years telling frightened strangers they'd be all right. The night the bill came for her, the man behind the desk slid it back across the counter and told her the machine had already declined her card. Same desk where she'd stood 10,000 nights, same fluorescent hum. She just looked at the paper. She didn't argue. She never did. The man who froze her out had a name too. Grant Whitfield. Regional Revenue Director, hired suit, brought in when the corporation bought the hospital. He'd stood in that same lobby weeks before and said it plain, to her face in front of the night staff. Compassion isn't a line item. Ms. Marsh, everyone pays. $214,000. 60 days before a lien went on the little house she'd lived in for 29 years. But there's a detail I need you to hold on to. 3 towns away, in a mechanic's wallet, there was a folded index card, soft at the corners from years of handling. It read, in careful handwriting, "Paid you matter. A friend." He'd kept it 11 years. He didn't know who wrote it. None of them did. There were dozens of those cards out there, tucked in glove boxes and Bible pages and kitchen drawers all over that county. Then one man saw her name on a fundraiser, and something in him went cold, and then very, very warm. If you believe kindness never goes unnoticed, this story is for you. Before we go on, if stories like this one mean something to you, take 1 second and subscribe, because this channel lives on people who still believe in it. And do me a small favor. Tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. I read them. I want to know where you are tonight. Now let me take you back to the beginning, to a cold bus and a woman with a taped coat, long before any city knew her name. The bus ran the number 9 line through Calder, Ohio, and Colleen took it every night at 6:15. Calder was a Rust Belt town that used to make axles. Then the plant closed, and then the second plant closed. And now, the town made not much of anything except people who were one bad night away from a bill they couldn't pay. You could see it from the bus window, shuttered storefronts with the letters ghosting off the brick, a pawn shop that stayed lit, a church with a food pantry sign in the yard. Colleen sat where she always sat, 3 rows back on the right, thermos between her knees. The thermos was old steel, dented on one side, and it held coffee she'd made at 4 that afternoon. She'd drink it lukewarm at 3 in the morning and be grateful for it. Her coat was navy, a good coat once, and the left seam had gone at the shoulder. She'd taped it from the inside with medical tape so it wouldn't gap in the wind. 2 years now, that tape. She kept meaning to sew it. She never got to it. She was 58. Her hands showed it. Nurses' hands, scrubbed raw 1,000 times, the knuckles a little swollen. A burn scar on the right thumb from an autoclave in a hospital that didn't exist anymore. She wasn't a big talker. People who worked with her would tell you that first. Colleen didn't waste words. But when the doctors had said their piece and moved on to the next bay, when the family had gone home and the patient lay there in the dark with a machine beeping and no one to hold their hand, that's when Colleen showed up. She'd pull the stool close. She'd sit. She'd say the true thing in the fewest words, and somehow the fewest words were always enough. The bus let her off 2 blocks from Ledbetter Memorial. She walked the rest with her head down against the wind, thermos in one hand, bag over the other shoulder. The hospital rose up gray at the end of the street, 6 stories, a lit red cross on the top that you could see from the highway. 29 years she'd walked toward that light. She knew every crack in that sidewalk. She knew which door stuck in the cold. Inside, the night shift was just gearing up. The ER at Ledbetter was the kind of place that got quiet and then got loud with no warning in between. Colleen clocked in. She traded her coat for a cardigan she kept in her locker. She washed her hands to the elbow, the old way, the long way, humming something under her breath that had no tune. Then she went out to the floor and became the best version of herself that existed anywhere on this earth. The registration desk sat just inside the sliding doors, and behind it, most nights, sat Marisol Vega. Marisol was 36. sharp-eyed, quick with the computer, quicker with people. She and Colleen had worked the overnights together for 6 years. They didn't need to talk much. A look did it, a tilt of the head. Marisol knew things about Colleen that Colleen had never once said out loud, and she kept them the way you keep something precious and breakable, wrapped up, low on a shelf, out of the light. That night, the first real thing came in around 9. A young mother, maybe 22, 23. She had a toddler on her hip, a little boy, cheeks flushed with fever, that thin, high crying that means a child is truly sick and truly scared. The mother's coat was thinner than Colleen's. No hat. She'd run out of the house the second the thermometer scared her. The boy had a fever of 104 and an ear infection that had turned mean. The doctor saw him, wrote the script, ordered the first dose right there so the mother wouldn't have to wait on a pharmacy. Standard, kind even, as far as the medicine went. The boy quieted. The fever started its slow turn. And then it was time to leave. And leaving meant the desk. And the desk meant the copay. $340. Colleen watched it happen from across the floor, the way she'd watched it happen 1,000 times. She could read the whole thing in the woman's shoulders. The way she set the boy down and dug in her bag. The way she pulled out a card and it didn't take. The way she pulled out a second card and it didn't take either. The way her face went from worry to something worse, that particular shame that only money puts on a person, in public, under bright lights, with a stranger waiting. The woman started to gather the boy up. She was going to leave without the discharge done properly. She was going to just go and carry that feeling home with her, and it would sit in her chest for years. Marisol caught Colleen's eye. Colleen gave the smallest nod. And here is the thing they did. Quiet and smooth. A thing they'd done so many times it had worn a groove. Marisol turned back to the young mother, and her voice changed, went bright and easy. Oh, hold on. You qualify for the charity fund. It's already covered. Anonymous happens all the time. Don't even worry about it. She tapped a few keys. She ran the payment through and marked it the way she always marked it. Anonymous, charity fund. Clean, the screen said paid. The woman's face broke open. She said, thank you, oh my God, thank you, and Marisol waved it off like it was nothing. Like it was the hospital's money, like it was a form that filled itself. It was not the hospital's money. Colleen came over as the mother was zipping the boy back into his little coat. She crouched to the child's level and pressed the back of 2 fingers to his forehead. Professional. Checking. He'll be right as rain by morning, she said. You did good bringing him. You did exactly right. Then she stood and handed the mother the discharge papers, folded, and the woman took them and left with her son on her hip, and her shame lifted clean off her. Inside those folded papers was an index card, white, lined, folded once. On it, in Colleen's careful hand, 4 short lines. Paid, you matter. A friend. The mother wouldn't find it until she got home. She'd unfold the discharge instructions at her kitchen table with the boy finally sleeping, and the little card would fall out onto the table, and she'd read it, and she'd sit very still for a while. She'd keep it. Of course she'd keep it. She'd put it in the drawer with the takeout menus and the spare batteries, and every few months for years she'd come across it, and it would stop her cold. A stranger, a friend, someone she'd never meet. That's what she'd think. Someone I'll never meet. She was wrong about that, but it would take years to find out. Colleen went back to washing her hands. Marisol went back to her screen. Neither of them said a word about it. That was the whole of it. Ordinary as breathing. Now I want to tell you what that card actually cost. Because the number matters. And the number is the whole heart of this. The $340 did not come from a fund. There was a fund on paper, a real charity account the hospital kept, but it was small and it was tapped out most of the year by policy and paperwork and people who had to say no to keep the lights on. The $340 came out of Colleen Marsh. It came from her checking account, transferred over in a way she and Marisol had rigged up years back, so the payment showed as charity on the system and never once carried Colleen's name. It came from a woman who took the bus because she didn't keep a car, who taped her coat because a new one was $90 she'd rather give away, who worked Saturday shifts at a nursing home across town on top of her full-time overnights at Ledbetter, so that the account the strangers drew from would keep having something in it. 11 years she'd been doing it. 11 winters. She never called it anything. She never told a soul, except Marisol. And she'd never really told Marisol either. Marisol had just figured it out and stepped in to help, the way you do. And the two of them had become a quiet machine for catching people at the exact moment they fell. A copay here, a prescription there, a tank of gas for a family sleeping in the waiting room. Colleen never gave enough to save anyone's life in some grand way. She gave the small amount that let a person keep their dignity on the worst night of their year. That was her whole religion. She had no other. Dr. Ada Boone was the one who first started to see the shape of it, and Dr. Boone was only 33 and only 2 years out of residency and still had the habit of noticing things she wasn't supposed to notice. She was a resident on the overnight rotation, whip-smart, tired the way they're all tired, and she liked Colleen the way everyone liked Colleen. But Boone had a scientist's eye, and she'd started to see a pattern that didn't add up. The cards, for one. She'd seen 2 of them now. A patient had left one on the counter by accident, and Boone had glanced at it. Weeks later, she saw another. Same handwriting, same 4 lines. Paid, you matter, a friend. She filed it away. And then there was the other thing, the thing she wasn't proud of noticing, because it felt like snooping. She'd seen Colleen's pay stub once, left on the break room table by mistake, and she'd been surprised how small it was. And then, months later, she'd caught another glimpse, and it was smaller still. A senior nurse, 29 years in, working every overtime shift the schedule allowed, and a second job besides, and somehow taking home less than a woman with that seniority ought to. Boone couldn't square it. She assumed, the way a reasonable person assumes, that there had to be some outside answer. A garnishment. A debt. Or, and this was the theory she liked best, because it was the kindest, a wealthy donor somewhere, some anonymous benefactor funneling money through the hospital, and Colleen just the trusted hands that passed it along. She was half right and completely wrong. The donor was real. The donor took the number 9 bus and taped her own coat. Let me tell you about the mechanic, because he matters more than anyone yet knows. His name was Wesley Harlan, but no one on this earth called him Wesley. He was Tuck, had been Tuck since he was 9 years old, and now he was 61 and he ran long-haul rigs and fixed anything with an engine. Big hands. Slow to talk, like Colleen, which is maybe why the thing between them. The thing neither of them knew was a thing had the shape it had. 11 years back, Tuck had come into Ledbetter's ER at 2 in the morning with a pain in his chest and his left arm gone numb, and a certainty he was about to die on the waiting room floor. He was between jobs. He had no insurance to speak of. He'd almost not come in at all. Had sat in his truck in the parking lot for 20 minutes, arguing with himself, because he knew what an ambulance ride and a cardiac workup cost, and he'd rather have died cheap than live broke. That's a real thing men in towns like Calder tell themselves. He finally came in because he thought of his dog at home with nobody to feed it. It wasn't a heart attack. It was close cousin to one. The kind of warning the body sends before the real thing, and they kept him and they ran the tests and they put him on the medicine that honestly saved his life, because he took it after that and he changed some things. But he lay in that bay at 4 in the morning doing the other math, the money math. The math that had almost kept him in the truck, and a nurse came and sat down on the stool beside him. Didn't say much. Checked his line. Then she said, "You're going to be around a while yet, Mr. Harlan. Your body just sent you a letter. We're going to make sure you read it." And she stayed a minute in the quiet, and then she went on to the next person who needed her. When they discharged him, The bill that should have wrecked him wasn't there. Charity fund, the clerk said. Anonymous, and folded in his paperwork was a white index card. Paid, you matter. A friend. Tuck Harlan was not a man who cried. He cried in his truck in that parking lot, alone, at dawn, holding a 3-inch card. He'd carried it in his wallet every day for 11 years. He'd taken it out and looked at it on the bad days, and the bad days had been many, and every time it had done the same quiet work on him. Someone, somewhere had decided he mattered when he himself wasn't sure. He didn't know who. He'd asked once, at the desk, months later, and they told him the fund was anonymous by design, and there was no way to know. And he'd made his peace with never knowing. He'd told himself, someday, somehow, I pay that back. Not to her. To the world. He never got the chance to pay it back the small way. The world was going to hand him a much bigger way, and he had no idea it was coming. That's two. 2 cards out in the county, held by 2 people who'd never met each other. Each one certain their card was the only card. There were dozens. And the woman who wrote them all was, right now, in the present, standing at a sink at Ledbetter Memorial, washing her hands to the elbow the long way, humming nothing, 3 weeks before the man in the suit walked in and switched off the whole machine. Grant Whitfield came on a Tuesday. Aldermont Health had bought Ledbetter 18 months prior. 1 hospital in a portfolio of 40, and for a while, nothing much had changed on the night shift, except the letterhead and the login screen. Then, the email started. Efficiency, alignment, revenue integrity, words that meant nothing on the floor, and everything upstairs. And then they sent a man to make the words real. And the man was Whitfield, 44, Regional Revenue Director. A person who had never in his life sat on a stool beside a frightened stranger at 4 a.m. and never would. He came at night on purpose. That told you something. He wanted to see the overnight, the shift with the least oversight and, in his reading of the spreadsheets, the most leakage. He had a laptop and a lanyard and a way of standing that took up more room than his body. He'd been auditing what he called charity leakage across the region, and Ledbetter's night ER had lit up his report like a flare. A charity fund that got fed, month after month, in amounts and on nights that didn't match any grant schedule or any donor cycle he could find. Undocumented, untraceable to Whitfield, untraceable meant one thing: fraud, or something close enough to write down as fraud. He didn't understand what he was looking at. That's the thing. He was looking at the single most documented act of love in that whole building, every payment logged, every night, for 11 years, and because it had no rich name attached, and no receipt he recognized, he read it as a hole in the boat. He gathered the night staff by the desk around 10. Not a meeting exactly. He just started talking, and they gathered, because that's what you do when the man from corporate starts talking. Colleen stood at the back with her arms crossed over her cardigan. Marisol sat at her terminal, very still, hands off the keys. Doctor. Boone leaned in a doorway with a chart she'd stopped reading. Whitfield explained, in the patient voice men like him use for people they've decided are simple, that the hospital had been carrying a great deal of undocumented write-off through something the night staff had been calling a charity fund. That effective immediately, that fund was frozen pending audit. That going forward, every patient would be responsible for their balance at time of service. And that arrangements, he liked the word arrangements, could be made through the proper channels during business hours, with the proper documentation. Somebody asked, quiet, what happens if they can't pay tonight? Whitfield smiled a little. Not cruel. Worse than cruel. Certain then we follow up through collections like everyone else, he said. Look, I understand this feels hard. But compassion isn't a line item, Miss Marsh, he said it to Colleen, though she hadn't spoken a word. He'd read her name in his report 100 times. He knew exactly whose fund it was, he just didn't know what it was. Everyone pays, he said. That's not cruelty. That's fairness, everyone pays. And under the fluorescent light, at the very desk where 1,000 cards had been folded into 1,000 sets of discharge papers, the machine went dark. Marisol's screen flashed a notice. Fund suspended. A little gray box. That easy. 11 years, a gray box. Colleen said nothing. Understand that about her. She didn't argue with Whitfield, and she didn't cry, and she didn't make a speech, because that was never who she was. And because part of her, the broken part, the blind part, half believed a man like that couldn't be argued with, and half believed she had no right to argue. She just uncrossed her arms and went back to work. 20 minutes later, a man came in with a hand he'd nearly taken off with a table saw, and he had no insurance and $11 in his wallet, and when it came time to leave. The copay was there, and the fund was frozen, and the man went gray in the face the way they do. And Colleen walked to the desk, and she took out her own wallet, the worn one, and she counted out the cash. Her cash. From her coat pocket. And she paid it at the window, like any stranger would. No fund. No gray box. No anonymous. Just a 58-year-old woman in a taped coat paying a stranger's bill in front of the man who'd just outlawed exactly that. Whitfield watched her do it. He didn't understand what he was seeing. He wrote nothing down, because there was nothing on his form for it. That was the loudest night of the first stretch, and it changed the game. Because now, the giving had to go underground even from the hospital itself. No more charity fund. No more clean gray box. Now Colleen paid in cash at the window, or in money orders she bought at the grocery store, or slipped folded bills across to Marisol, who found ways to make a balance disappear that were riskier and slower and cost more of both of them. And the strangers kept coming. Because Whitfield's everyone pays didn't make people richer. It just made the ones who couldn't pay start getting letters. Collections letters. On Ledbetter letterhead. To people who'd come in scared and left scared air. So Colleen dug deeper. She picked up a third shift somewhere in there. She stopped the small things she'd allowed herself, which weren't many to begin with. The account thinned, and the cards kept getting written, because the card was the part she'd never give up. The 4 lines, the friend, the you matter, in her careful hand, folded into papers all over Calder. There was the teacher. Laid off when the middle school consolidated. Came in with kidney stones and a face full of that same shame, and left with a money order's worth of relief and a card in his coat. There was the girl. 17, a car wreck out on the county road, alive by luck, terrified, her parents' insurance a mess of deductibles, and she left the ER with a bandaged collarbone and a folded index card she wouldn't understand for years. Each one a stranger. Each one certain they were the only one. Each one carrying a card in the same hand. And Dr. Boone watched the cards multiply, and watched Colleen's stubs shrink, and became more and more sure there was a wealthy hand behind it all, some donor, and she started, gently, to try to find out who. She meant well. She always meant well. She thought if she could just find the donor, she could protect the giving from men like Whitfield, get it documented, get it safe. She had no idea the donor was standing next to her at the med card at 3 in the morning, yawning $60 poorer than she'd been at dinner. The debt grew. Not the debt anyone could see on a spreadsheet. The other debt. The one owed back to a friend nobody could name. Every card was a marker. Paid, you matter. And every person who held one owed, in the invisible ledger of the thing, a little piece of that grace back to whoever had spent it on them. Dozens of markers. Dozens of people. All of it pointing back to one underpaid woman, and none of them knowing it, and the total climbing higher every single night she worked. Which was most nights. Because that was the other thing about that winter. Colleen had started getting tired. Not ordinary tired. Not the honest tired of the overnight. The kind that sleep fixes. A different tired. A tired that lived low in her body and didn't lift. She noticed it first on the stairs at home. The stairs of the little house she'd lived in for 29 years. The house with her mother's clock still on the wall. She'd get to the top and have to stand a second. Then it was the bus. The walk from the bus. The way the 2 blocks to Ledbetter started taking more out of her than 2 blocks should. She told herself it was age. She told herself it was the extra shift. She was a nurse. She knew better. And knowing better, she did what nurses do worst of all, which is nothing. For herself, for far too long. She lost some weight she couldn't explain. Her waistband went loose. There was a fullness low in her belly that she kept meaning to have looked at and kept not having looked at. Because to be looked at was to sit on the other side of it. To be the patient, to be the burden, and Colleen Marsh would sooner die, and I want you to hear how nearly literal that is. She would sooner die than be a burden to a single living soul. That was her blind spot, whole and complete. She could pour herself out for 1,000 strangers. She could not, would not, receive so much as a glass of water back. Being helped, to her, was the same as being a weight on someone. And she decided a long time ago, without ever saying it, that she would carry and never be carried. She worked the fever off, she thought. She worked the tiredness like it was a shift that would end. And on a Thursday night in the deep cold, in the middle of a code, with her hands doing the thing her hands had done 10,000 times, the floor of the ER came up sideways. It happened fast, and it happened quiet, which is how the big things happen. 1 second she was pushing meds and calling numbers in that flat, steady voice that made scared people less scared. The next the edges of the room went soft and gray, and there was a high sound, and her knees weren't hers anymore. Marisol was around the desk before Colleen hit the floor. Dr. Boone was there in 3 strides, on her knees, hands already working, saying Colleen's name. Saying it again sharper, the other nurses turned from their own patient because one of their own was down, and for one terrible minute the ER at Ledbetter Memorial, the place Colleen had held together with her quiet hands for 29 years, tilted around the sight of her on the tile, with her cardigan rucked up, and her face the color of the walls. She came around before they got the crash cart, waved it off, embarrassed, already trying to sit up, already saying, "I'm fine. I just stood up too fast. I skipped lunch. Let me up. There's a patient." Because even flat on the floor of her own ER, the first word out of her was about someone else. Dr. Boone put a hand flat on her shoulder and pressed her down. And Boone's voice, when it came, was not a colleague's voice anymore. It was a doctor's. "Colleen, stay down. You're the patient now. You don't get a vote." And Colleen, who had never once in 11 years been on the wrong side of that stool, looked up at the lights of the ceiling she knew better than her own bedroom, and felt the floor cold through her scrubs, and understood with a nurse's terrible clarity, before any test, before any word, that something in her had been very wrong for a long time, and she had chosen not to look. And she thought, this is the truth of her all the way down, she thought, not about herself. She thought, there's a mother coming in at 6 with a boy who spikes fevers, and Marisol won't know to cover the copay, and the fund's frozen, and who's going to fold the card. That was what she thought about, on the floor, with her heart stumbling and the doctor's hand on her chest and the whole night shift gone silent around her. Not the house, not the tiredness, not the number that was, at that very moment, already forming somewhere in a billing system that would soon have her name on it, and a lean clock ticking down toward the little house with her mother's clock. She thought about a stranger's card, and somewhere 3 towns away, a mechanic named Tuck Harlan slept with a folded index card in the wallet on his nightstand, 11 years old, soft at the corners, and had no idea in the world that the friend who wrote it had just gone down on a cold ER floor, with the whole rest of the story still ahead of her. The diagnosis came on a Tuesday, in a room she had wheeled 100 other people into. Dr. Boone stood at the foot of the bed with the scan up on the screen. She didn't soften it. Colleen wouldn't have let her. There was a mass. It was on the left ovary, and it was not small, and it had been there long enough to send out roots. The word for it was aggressive. The plan for it was surgery, and soon, and then the long poison after. Colleen listened the way she'd taught herself to listen. Hands folded. Face still. She asked how many centimeters. She asked about the margins. She asked it all like it belonged to somebody else, some patient down the hall. And Boone answered every question, and then stopped and said, "Colleen, this is you. You know that. This is happening to you." "I know," Colleen said. She didn't cry. She looked at the clock on the wall, the hospital clock, the ugly institutional one, and she thought about her mother's clock at home. 29 years on that wall. She thought, with a small cold clarity, that a lien was a thing they put on a house. And then she made herself stop thinking about the house. Because the house was hers to lose, and that was a private matter, and there was a shift starting in an hour. That was the blind spot, all the way down. She could carry a whole city's fear. She could not carry her own. They wanted to admit her. She signed herself back out. She told them she had affairs to put in order, which was true. And she told them she felt fine, which was a lie she'd told so many frightened people that it came out smooth. Boone argued. Colleen won, the way tired, stubborn people always win against people who have to go home eventually. She went back to the desk instead of home. Marisol saw her coming and stood up so fast her chair rolled back and hit the wall. "You are supposed to be lying down," Marisol whispered. "Ada told me." "I heard." "Colleen, there's a boy coming in at 6, Colleen said. "The Fevers, remember? The mother with the little boy." "Colleen, the fund's frozen, so it's cash. I've got it." She was already reaching into the coat, the navy one with the taped shoulder seam, and pulling out folded bills that were soft from being folded and refolded. $340. She'd carried it in case. She always carried it in case. Run it as self-pay, paid in full, and don't put my name on anything. And she stopped, and for 1 second her hand shook, and she pressed it flat on the counter until it stopped. "And I need a card. Give me a card." Marisol didn't move. "Marisol, a card." And Marisol, crying now, quiet, pulled one plain index card from the box under the desk and set it down. Colleen took the pen off the chain. She wrote the 4 words she'd written 1,000 times, in the same careful hand, pressing hard the way she always did so the letters would hold. "Paid. You matter. A friend." She folded it once. She slid it across. "Put it in the discharge papers," she said, "where the mother won't see it till she's home." That was the woman. That was the whole of her. Sick past hiding it, a house on a clock, and the thing she did with the last hour of standing up she had left in her was buy a stranger's boy his medicine and tell him he mattered. She hid it for 3 weeks after that. She took the partial shifts. She told the charge nurse it was her back. She scheduled her surgery for a Thursday and worked the Wednesday. She learned to sit down between rooms in a way that looked like resting her feet. She got very good at being the sickest person in a building full of sick people and letting no one know. And the machine came for her the whole time. Because here was the thing about the surgeon. The mass needed a specialist, and the specialist the system routed her to was the one Aldermont had contracted. And Aldermont's contract and Colleen's own insurance, the insurance her own employer gave her, did not agree. The surgeon was out of network. Nobody told her that in a room. It arrived on paper. It arrived the way it arrived for everyone she'd ever covered. In an envelope. In numbers with no mercy in them. $214,000. She sat at her kitchen table under her mother's clock and read it 3 times to be sure the zeros were real. Surgery, anesthesia, the out-of-network multiplier that turned a covered procedure into a personal catastrophe. The same trap. The exact same trap she'd been quietly springing people out of for 11 years, one copay at a time, and now it had closed on her, and there was no friend behind her with a folded card. She almost laughed. She didn't. She just sat there while the clock ticked, and the coffee went cold in the dented steel thermos, and she did the math she'd done for other people so many times. And the math came out the same for her as it did for them. It came out, "You cannot pay this." Then the second envelope came, and this one had a name on it she knew. Aldermont Health. Collections Division. The same division. The same signature block in a different font that had frozen her fund under the fluorescent lights. 60 days. After 60 days, a lien would be filed against the property. The little house. 29 years. Her mother's clock on the wall of it. She read that one only once. She put it face down on the table. She went to work. It was Dr. Boone who almost found her out. Boone had been carrying a thing for weeks, a loose thread she couldn't stop pulling. The cards. She'd seen 4 of them now, in 4 sets of discharge papers, and she'd started keeping a mental file. Same stock. Same fold. Same 4 words. And she'd noticed the other thing, the thing nobody was supposed to notice, that Colleen Marsh, 29 years in, worked more doubles than the new grads, and somehow always looked broker than them. Boone had a theory. Her theory was a donor. Some rich retired doctor, some foundation, somebody with real money running mercy through the night desk. That was the only way the numbers worked in her head. One nurse couldn't fund a city. Then she saw the board. The break room corkboard, where people pinned schedules and thank you notes and the occasional obituary. There was a note there, old, curling at the corner. Please cover 3B's parking. Family drove from Marietta. C.M. Colleen's initials. Colleen's hand. Boone stood in front of it a long time. Then she took out her phone, where she'd photographed one of the cards weeks ago, because she was the kind of person who photographed loose threads, and she held the phone up next to the note, and she looked at the M. The way the M came down hard on the last stroke. The way the A closed at the top. It was the same hand. It was exactly the same hand. She found Colleen in the med room, and she didn't lead up to it. It's you, Boone said. There's no donor. It was never a donor. It's you. It's been you the whole time. Colleen didn't turn around. She kept counting the things she was counting. You should get some sleep, Ada. You're seeing patterns. The cards are your handwriting. Lots of people write plain. Colleen, Boone's voice cracked on it. You're paying a $200,000 bill, and you're still buying strangers their copays. I've watched your checks. I've watched you get thinner. Please, please, let me. There's nothing to let you do, Colleen said. And now she did turn, and her face was so calm and so closed that Boone lost her nerve against it. You've got a good imagination and a soft heart, and you'll make a fine doctor. Go home. And Boone went. Because you cannot force a door that somebody is holding shut from the inside with the whole weight of who they are. But she didn't stop knowing. She just carried it, the way Colleen carried things, quietly, and waited for a crack. The crack, when it came through Marisol. Because the lean clock ran down. It ran down, the way clocks do, indifferent, and it got to its final week, and Colleen came off a treatment that left her gray and shaking, and she still came in. And one night at the desk, Marisol watched her sign something. Colleen thought she was being discreet. She wasn't, not to the person who'd guarded her secret for 6 years. It was a real estate document. It was the beginning of the paperwork you do when you are going to sell a house before someone takes it. Sell it cheap and fast. Sell it for less than it's worth, so that at least the leaving is on your own terms. Colleen was going to give up the house rather than ask a single human being for a single thing. And Marisol Vega, 36 years old, who had kept this secret so faithfully for so long that keeping it had become the shape of her loyalty, understood in that moment that the secret was the thing that was going to kill her friend. Not the cancer. The secret. The silence. The blind spot the size of a life. So she broke it. She didn't ask permission. She drove, on her night off, 3 towns over, to a house with a truck in the drive and a light on in the kitchen, and she knocked on the door of a 61-year-old mechanic named Wesley Harlan that everybody called Tuck, a man she had never met. A name she only knew because 11 years ago she'd been new at the desk and she'd watched Colleen cover a trucker's chest pain visit and slip a card into his papers, and she'd never forgotten it, because it was the first one she ever saw. Tuck opened the door in his socks. He had the wary look of a man not used to knocks after dark. "You don't know me," Marisol said, "but I need to tell you about the card in your wallet." His whole face changed. "You still have it," she said. It wasn't a question. She could see it was true. 11 years, Tuck said slowly. "In my wallet. On the nightstand every night." He put a hand flat against his own chest, unconsciously, over the place where the pain had been all those years ago. "I never knew who. They told me it was made so I couldn't find out. Made that way on purpose." "It was a nurse," Marisol said. "Her name is Colleen Marsh. She's paid for strangers at that hospital for 11 years out of her own paychecks, working doubles, working weekends, and she folded every card by hand and she never let one of us say her name." Marisol's voice was steady now, the way you get steady when you've finally decided to stop being careful. "And she's dying. Mr. Harlan, cancer, and the same hospital's collections office is about to take her house for a bill she can't pay, and she is going to let them, because she would rather lose everything than ask one person for help. And I have kept her secret for 6 years, and I am done. I'm done keeping it. She needs somebody to be as stubborn back at her as she's been at all of us." Tuck Harlan stood in his doorway a long moment. The porch light buzzed. Somewhere a dog barked and quit. Then he said, in the flat, certain voice of a man who has just found the one thing in his life he was always meant to do, "Ma'am, you'd best come in and write down how her name's spelled." He posted it the next morning. He wasn't a man of the internet, Tuck. He had a page he checked twice a year. But his niece helped him. And what he did was simple. He laid the card on his kitchen table in the morning light. 11 years old, soft at the corners. The 4 words faded but holding. "Paid. You matter. A friend." He took a photograph of it. And under it he wrote, in his own blunt spelling, 11 years ago I went into Ledbetter Memorial with my chest tearing up and no way to pay. Somebody paid my whole bill and left me this card and told me I mattered. I never knew who. I kept it in my wallet every day since. I found out this week. It was a night nurse named Colleen Marsh, and she has done this for strangers for 11 years out of her own pocket and told nobody. She is sick now, and the hospital is about to take her house over a bill. She is out of time. She never asked any of us for a thing. Now we pay. Here is where. And he put the link to the fundraiser his niece had made, with a goal on it. A modest goal. A goal the size of one person's imagination of what a few people might spare. The goal was small change against a city, because here is what nobody had counted on, least of all Colleen. 11 years is a long time. 11 winters of copays, hundreds of nights. Do the arithmetic of a decade of a nurse's mercy, and you do not get a handful of people. You get a crowd. You get a whole quiet population of the saved, scattered across a Rust Belt city, each one carrying a folded card and a private mystery. Each one having wondered for years who the friend was, and now, all at once, on the same morning, getting their answer. The toddler's mother saw it first among them. Her boy was 6 now, healthy, loud, currently drawing on her wall with a marker. She saw Tuck's post because somebody shared it, and she saw the photograph of the card, and she went very still. And then she walked to the kitchen drawer where she kept the important papers, the birth certificate and the lease, and she took out a folded index card she had saved for 6 years because she had never been able to throw it away. She unfolded it next to the screen. The same stock. The same fold. The 4 words in the same careful hand, pressed hard. She started to cry standing at the counter, with her boy drawing on the wall behind her. And she typed 3 words before she typed anything else. 3 words that were about to be typed by half a city. I knew it. Then she posted her own card next to the mother's photograph. This is mine. My son was 104 with an ear infection, and I had $340 to my name, and none of it enough, and I was walking out the door in shame, and a nurse I never met paid it, and told me I mattered. I have kept this card in a drawer for 6 years. It's her. It was her the whole time. The teacher saw it next. The one who'd been laid off. The one with the kidney stones. The one who'd found a card in his coat pocket he swore he never put there. He had his still too. He posted it. The teenager saw it. A young woman now, 20, who at 17 had gone through a windshield-adjacent nightmare with a broken collarbone and a card she hadn't understood for years, and only now, watching it detonate across her screen, finally understood and wept in a college dorm 300 miles away and posted the card she'd carried the whole time. The welder, the woman whose husband stitches, the old man who's insulin, the girl whose stitches on her chin, 1 by 1, then 10 by 10, then faster than anyone could count. The cards came up out of drawers and wallets and Bibles and glove boxes all over Calder, Ohio, held up to phone cameras, the same stock, the same fold, the same 4 words in the same hand, and every single one of them said the same thing underneath. It's her. It was always her. And she never told a soul. The fundraiser passed $214,000 in a single day. It did not stop there. It did not slow down. A number that had sat on Colleen's kitchen table like a death sentence was cleared before lunch by people giving $11, $20, whatever was in the account. And it kept climbing because the city was not paying a bill anymore. The city was answering a card. Every $11 donation was somebody saying back across all those years, "You mattered too, and I never got to tell you." And it wasn't only money. A diner 3 blocks from the hospital, the kind with a neon sign and counter stools, closed for the afternoon and cooked for the whole IQ floor, carried it in trays, wouldn't take a dime. Tuck Harlan drove his truck to the little house with the taped seam coat and the mother's clock, and he brought 2 men and a load of shingles, and he re-roofed the house Colleen had been about to give away. In the cold, in a day, because a man who has waited 11 years to repay a debt does not waste the chance when it comes. The laid-off teacher's old students, grown now, some of them, filled the hospital lobby with handmade signs. The registration desk, the exact desk where Grant Whitfield had frozen the fund under the fluorescent light and said everyone pays, could not be reached through the crowd. They wheeled Colleen down into it because Marisol and Boone conspired to get her there. Told her there was a staffing thing in the lobby she needed to sign off on. An old lie, a nurse's lie, and Colleen, gray and thin and wrapped in a hospital blanket, let Boone push the chair because she was too tired that day to fight it. The elevator doors opened on the lobby, and Colleen Marsh, who had spent 30 years telling frightened strangers they would be all right, and 11 of those years telling them so on folded index cards she signed a friend, came around the corner in a wheelchair and saw the whole thing at once. The lobby was packed wall to wall, hundreds of them. And when they saw her, when the front of the crowd registered the gray woman in the chair, the navy blanket, the face they had all wondered about for years, the whole room went silent. Just silent. A hospital lobby at midday, dead quiet. And then they lifted the cards. All at once. Hundreds of folded index cards, unfolded now, raised over hundreds of heads, every one of them reading the same 4 words in her own hand. Paid. You matter. A friend. A whole city holding up her own handwriting, giving it back to her. Colleen made a sound she had never made in that building in 29 years. At the front stood Tuck Harlan, wallet card in his rough fingers, and he read it out loud into the silence, his voice not steady, reading the 4 words like they were scripture. Paid, you matter, a friend. And then he looked at her over the top of the card and he said, "I kept it 11 years, ma'am. I finally get to say it back." Marisol was at the break room board, the same board where the secret had lived in curling notes for 6 years, and she pinned 2 things to it where everyone could see. The fundraiser total. And, next to it, not to shame Colleen, but to end the silence forever, 1 line: "This is who she was to all of us." Boone knelt down by the wheelchair. Colleen was crying now without any of her old control, both hands over her mouth, shaking her head, the way people do when a thing is too big to be received. And out of the crowd, a woman stepped forward, the toddler's mother, 6 years older. And she was holding a boy of 6 on her hip, a healthy loud boy, 104 degrees a lifetime ago and pink-cheeked now. And she lifted him up high so that Colleen could see him over all the raised cards. "This is him," the mother said, her voice breaking clean in half. "This is the boy. He's 6. He's fine. He's fine because of you. I never got to say thank you. I'm saying it now. Thank you. Thank you." Colleen looked at the boy. She had never seen him. She had paid $340 for him one night 6 years ago, and folded a card and never once imagined his face. And here he was, alive and squirming and real, held up over a sea of her own words. She couldn't speak. She just reached out one shaking hand toward the boy, toward all of them. And the crowd, seeing it, made a sound like a held breath finally let go. Grant Whitfield walked into that. He came to manage it. That was the word he'd have used. The story had gone regional overnight. A nurse, a city, a wall of cards. It was the kind of thing that traveled, and Aldermont's corporate parent had started making noises. And Whitfield came down to the lobby to be seen doing something, to get ahead of the optics. 44 years old in a good suit, with a phrase already loaded about the company's deep commitment to community. He came around the same corner Colleen had come around, and he stopped. Because he'd expected a press event. A ribbon, maybe. Instead, he walked into a wall of people, hundreds of them, every one of them holding up a card. And every card said the same thing. And the thing it said was the exact opposite of everything he had come to that hospital to enforce. You matter. You matter. You matter. 100 times. 500 times. Held up in the faces of the people his everyone pays had been designed to squeeze. These were his numbers, his line items, his leakage. Standing up, holding cards, staring at him. There was a regional camera already live in the corner. He saw the red light on it. He knew what he was standing in. The teenager reached him first. The girl from the car wreck, 20 now, collarbone long-heeled, and she walked right up to Grant Whitfield with her 7-year-old card in her hand, and she held it out to him. Not thrown. Not shoved. Just held out. Level. For him to take. He looked at it. He didn't take it. And Tuck Harlan's voice came across the quiet lobby. Not shouting, just carrying. The voice of a man who fixes things and knows the weight of a torque. You said everyone pays. Tuck was looking straight at him. I heard about that. You stood at that desk right there, and you said compassion isn't a line item, and everyone pays. He nodded, slow, like he was agreeing. You were right. You just had it backwards. He lifted his own card. Today the city's paying her back. Everyone pays. Look around. Everybody in this room's paying. Behind Whitfield, on the lobby television bolted up in the corner, the newsband was already scrolling it, because his own corporate parent had done the math faster than he had, the math of a story like this against a quarter's margin, and the words crawled across the screen in white letters for the whole silent lobby to read. Aldermont Health reverses regional collections policy. Charity fund at Ledbetter Memorial to be restored and protected. His policy. Read back to him on his own screen, over his own head, in front of every witness who had ever suffered under it. Whitfield opened his mouth. Nothing came out. There was nothing to come out. There was no line item for this. He looked at the girl still holding the card out to him, and at the wall of her own handwriting behind her, and at the woman in the wheelchair he had frozen the fund on, who was not gloating, who was not even looking at him, who was only weeping at the sight of the cards coming home and had not spared him a single glance. That was the worst of it, maybe. She didn't even look at him. He wasn't the story. He'd never been the story. He'd only ever been the machine, and the machine had just been switched off by the exact mercy he swore didn't scale. He turned, and he left. No word. No violence done to him, none needed. He walked out through the automatic doors past the diner trays and the shingle truck and the teacher students with their signs. And the cards stayed up behind him, and the lobby, once he was gone, made a sound that started as one person and became all of them. And it wasn't a cheer exactly. It was more like the sound a city makes when it finally, all at once, gets to say the thing it's been holding for 11 years. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And Colleen Marsh sat in the middle of it in her wheelchair with her hands over her face and let them. For the first time in her whole life, she let them. She stopped saying, "I'm fine." She stopped saying, "There's a patient." She just sat there and let a city love her out loud, which was the hardest thing she had ever done, and she did it because there was nothing left to hide behind. And because the boy who was 6 was still up on his mother's hip smiling at her, and you cannot argue with a living child. 6 months later, it's early morning at the little house. The frost is on the grass. The number 9 bus goes by out on the main road, the same one she used to take, and she can hear it from the kitchen, that particular grind of it. She doesn't take it anymore. She's back on partial nights, 3 a week, because the doctors said she could, and because she would have gone out of her mind otherwise. And Boone drives her most shifts now and pretends it's on the way. She's in remission. They said the word carefully the first time, the way you hand someone something breakable, and Colleen received it the way she'd learned to receive things now, which is to say she let herself believe it a little. The house is hers, free of the lien. The paperwork she'd started to sign, the fast, cheap, on my own terms selling of it, sits somewhere in a drawer, unfinished, and it will stay unfinished. Her mother's clock is on the wall where it's been for 29 years, ticking. There's a new roof over it now, gray shingles laid straight and true by a mechanic and 2 of his friends in a single cold day. And it doesn't leak, and every time it rains she thinks of Tuck Harlan and the 11 years he carried her 4 words in his wallet. The taped seam code is gone. Somebody, she never found out who, there were too many to ask, left her a new one, warm, navy, no tape. She kept the old one anyway, folded in the closet. You don't throw out the thing that got you through. On the windowsill, in the morning sun, there's a mason jar. It's full of index cards. Not the ones she wrote. Those are out in the city, in wallets and drawers, and one in a college dorm 300 miles away. These are the ones that came back to her. People kept giving them back. They'd track down her address, or hand them to Marisol, or leave them at the desk. All those folded cards with her own handwriting on them, until she had a jar full of her own kindness returned, and it sits on the sill and catches the light, and some mornings she just stands and looks at it, with her coffee going cold in the dented steel thermos, which she kept, because some things you keep. The hospital's charity fund is running again. It has a different shape now. It has no name on it, she wouldn't allow her name, and for once they let her win a small thing. But it is funded by the whole city, by standing monthly gifts from a diner and a mechanic's shop and a teacher's union and 500 people who each give $11. And it is written into the hospital's bylaws, in language a lawyer donated, language specifically built so that no revenue director, no audit, no man in a good suit with a phrase about margins can ever freeze it again. It cannot be switched off under the fluorescent light. They made sure. The city made sure. There was a memo somewhere in the corporate machine, one dry line. Grant Whitfield transferred to another region. That's all. No drama in it. Just a man moved somewhere else, to be a machine somewhere else. And Colleen. When Marisol told her, only nodded, because she had never wanted him punished. She had only ever wanted no scared stranger to face a bill alone. And that, at least in this one city, for now, was true. It's near the end of the shift, 6:15 in the morning. The number 9 will be along soon. There's a young woman at the far end of the ER, and she's frightened. Colleen has seen the look 10,000 times and she'll never mistake it. A bill she can't cover. A night that went wrong. The particular shame of the register desk. She's gathering her things to leave. Quick. Before anyone can see her face. Marisol catches Colleen's eye across the floor. A small nod. Handled. Self-pay. Paid in full. No name. And Colleen Marsh, 58 years old, 58 years old, and alive, and in remission, and standing in the ER she knows better than her own bedroom, reaches into the pocket of a coat with no tape on the seam, and takes out a plain index card. She writes the 4 words in the same careful hand, pressing hard so the letters hold. Paid, you matter. A friend. She folds it once. She walks it down and tucks it into the young woman's discharge papers, where she won't find it until she's home, and safe, and wondering for the rest of her life who the friend was. Because that was never the point, the knowing. The point was the mattering. The debts you forgive quietly are the ones a city remembers loudest. Colleen learned that the hard way, flat on a cold floor with the whole rest of the story still ahead of her. She knows it now. And she's still writing the cards, because a city catching you once doesn't stop you being the kind of person who catches other people. It just means, finally, that somebody's got you too. If somebody ever tucked a card into your life when you weren't looking, a quiet payment, a covered bill, a stranger who said you mattered and asked for nothing back, tell me where you're from in the comments. Just the city. Let's see how far this reaches.